Thanks, Brother Rob. Good afternoon, friends. I hope I'm not as scary as that picture. Let's get into our topic. Is the devil ruling your life? Or, to put it another way, is the devil ruining your life? Still a fairly popular mystery, isn't it, that if something goes wrong, people automatically default and say, well, the devil made me do it, had no control, and it can lead to a life of ruin. I'd like to introduce to you my hypothetical friend, Kevin Steele. Now, Kevin Steele, he knows a bit about the Bible, but he's got a few hang-ups. He really believes in the devil, and he has really lost control of himself because he thinks that the devil has control of him. He knows a bit about the word, but he's sort of misguided, and we thought we'd bring some things to his attention. In future, we'll just call him Kev. So these are a few of his hang-ups. He really thinks that the devil is actively working in the world, in governments, in his life to bring about bad things. When bad things happen, it's the devil that's going to be blamed. You can read a few of those things. He thinks that the devil is an angel that's fallen from heaven. He has horns and a pitchfork. And I wonder where he gets a lot of these things. Maybe because he's watched too many movies. It's amazing when you Google the devil in movies, just how many movies feature this topic. But yeah, he does have a few hang-ups. He thinks that if you're bad, you'll go to hell, where there's fires that keep on burning, there's rotting corpses, and there's brimstone, and it's a terrible place where you're tortured for all eternity. And of course, when he does something which is wrong or mischievous, his retort is, well, the devil made me do it. Doesn't take ownership for his own actions. So I said to Kev, let's look more closely at this topic and let's look at the Bible and see what the Word says. We're going to do this, Kev, we're going to do this slowly. We're going to do it thoroughly because there's not only you hang up with the devil, but there's also the associated word of Satan. They almost go hand in hand, but there are differences, Kev. We pointed out that the devil occurs 57 times in the New Testament. And when we look up the original New Testament Greek word, the devil is translated from the word diabolos, which literally means to accuse somebody falsely. And Satan occurs 15 times in the Old Testament, 33 in the New, and it just has a meaning of being an adversary or an opponent. So there's some interesting facts, Kev, about these two words that you probably don't fully understand. There's a number of examples in the Bible where the word devil has been translated from the Greek into English as devil. Judas Iscariot was called the devil. Slanderous wives, older women, false accusing men, and human nature / sin. Now, thanks, Brother Rob, for reading Hebrews chapter 2:14, because we'd like to return back to there before we close, just to show the importance of this topic and the significance of that particular passage. Let's have a look at a couple of these passages that use the word devil, or do they? Just keep it ticked in your mind that the word devil is diabolos. Even so must their wives be grave, not slanderous. 1 Timothy 3:11, that doesn't actually use the word devil, but when we look at that word slander, in the original Greek, it has the word diabolos. And we've just discovered that the word diabolos is another word for devil. 2 Timothy 3, verse 1 to 3. Know this also, that in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, unholy, false accusers. And that word false accusers, again, is the word diabolos, despisers of those that are good. And why is this so? Why have the translators of the Bible not given the true word devil instead of using in 1 Timothy 3:11 slanderers, which means devil? They had the opportunity of using the word devil, but they thought it probably was going to be inappropriate. 2 Timothy 3:1 to 3, false accusers. That word is also the word diabolos, which means devil. So upon a little bit of drilling and examination, we can really get to the bottom of this mystery about the devil, the supernatural being that some people think. Titus chapter 2, verse 3, the same thing. False accuser is diabolos, which is devil. The King James Version could have read, the aged women likewise, that they be in behaviour as become holiness, not devils, not given to much wine, teachers of good things. It wouldn't have been a good look, I don't think. Can see why the translators did that, but it is completely thrown out what the true import of this word and the significance is. Diabolos, devil, doesn't really conjure up what Kev thinks is a supernatural fallen being. If we go to a concordance and have a look at the word devil, we can see there that it is diabolos, false accuser, or slanderer. You can Google a concordance, you can look up Strong's online and get to the original meaning of these old-fashioned words in Greek and the same in Hebrew. What about Satan? Kev, what do you think Satan means? It's a Hebrew word, not a name of a supernatural evil creature. Common noun meaning adversary or one who withstands. Here are some examples. I'll let you read those through. You might remember when Peter was trying to stop Jesus going to Jerusalem. Jesus said, "Get thee behind me, Satan." He wasn't calling Peter a supernatural fallen deity. Peter was an adversary to Jesus' plans. There's a couple of things there. Interesting one, if you want to look more into this topic, is 2 Samuel 24, verse 1. If you compare that to Chronicles 21:1, you'll find that God is described as an adversary. Haven't got time to go into that, but I'm sure that if you're interested, you'll look into that further. So we've talked about the Matthew 6:23, 1 Timothy 1:20, of whom Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I delivered unto Satan, that they may learn not to blaspheme. They delivered them to the adversary. So when we look up Satan in a concordance, we can see the meaning. It's a little bit small on my screen. Satan, adversary, to withstand, and that's all it means. So just on a very superficial examination, we can see that Kevin is on shaky waters. His foundation on which he understands the devil is just based on what has been taught by the churches, what cinema and novels portrays as being real, and it's not, because they haven't gone into it in the full depth of what the scripture actually teaches. But Kevin is also concerned about this topic as well, about demons. And he says, do they exist? Because they come up in the New Testament, actually came up in our daily readings from Luke today. Let's have a quick look at this one. So the word demons can be used in the New Testament in two ways. It can refer to idols in the Old, and Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 20 to 21, sacrifice to demons, which is really sacrificing to idols, or it's talking about mental or physical illnesses. Matthew 12, verse 22, then the one brought to him who was demon-possessed, blind and mute. He healed him so the blind and mute both spoke and saw. There are a number of examples in the scripture which refer to demons. The word demon is just the Greek word daimonion, and can be attributed to blindness, deafness, muteness, epilepsy, insanity, schizophrenia, as in Legion, who had possessed by many devils, many demons, or general sickness. Specific example is the one in Matthew 17. Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is an epileptic. And then in verse 18 of the same chapter, Jesus rebuked the demon and it came out of him. So what came out of the man, or the boy? It was the condition of epilepsy that was controlling his body, that sickness within him. It wasn't, as Kevin thinks, an evil spirit, a demon. Kev says, that's all very interesting. I'm taking on board what you're saying, but I think that there's more to this subject, because I'm sure that you haven't told me about Lucifer. And so Kevin turned up his Bible and he said, look, have a look at this. It's in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. It says, surely this was the origin of the devil, or his other name being Lucifer. Verse 12 says, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? He says, surely this is the origin of the devil. He was up there with God, cast out, did the wrong thing, fell to earth. Isn't this what this verse is saying? So, Kevin, like with everything, let's look at the context. And so let's read the surrounding verses to the Isaiah chapter 14 account. You can look it up now or just tuck this one away. So the context, the surrounding verses, in verse 4, take up this proverb against the king of Babylon. Because nowhere in this section of Isaiah 14 does the term devil or Satan make reference to. So I said to Kevin, this is an interesting topic and a very good chapter that you're looking at. Can you please explain why in verse 11 there's sounds of harps, in verse 11 covered with worms, verse 13 that the devil or Satan, the Lucifer, likes the north, and verse 16 he's called a man? I'll have to look into this a little bit more. But he said, before he finished, he said, look, let's just finish this off and talk about what the Lucifer is talking about, because it's actually literally the day star. It's planet Venus, appears just before dawn, climbs higher, and if we look at that context in Isaiah, it's actually a simile or a comparison to the king of Babylon, his rise to ascendancy and his inglorious fall from grace. Good friend Kev, he's not finished. It was a good discussion that we're having. I'm just sharing it with you. What about the anointed cherub? I said, what about the anointed cherub? I said, well, Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 13 to 15 says this is where the devil actually originated. He was an anointed cherub that fell from grace. Well, let's have a look at it. This is just a little synopsis of those chapters and those verses. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity was found in thee, and then the devil, Lucifer, fell from grace. Well, that's interesting. So what do we encourage Kev to do? Consider the context. Don't just take a verse in isolation. Have a look at the context or the verses before and after. So, Ezekiel 28 verse 2, Son of man, say to the prince of Tyrus. That's who this anointed cherub was. It was the king of Tyrus. And the chapters are talking about the fall and demise of that nation of Tyre. Kev, what about that this anointed cherub is called a man in verse 2 and 9? They traffic in riches and gold and silver, that they die by the hand of strangers. They're brought to ashes to be no more. So literally, this cherub is a dying creature, not an everlasting, immortal being inhabiting the subterranean areas when a person passes and is sinful and then is tortured forevermore. So what does it actually mean? It does refer to the king of Tyre. And at that stage in Israel's development, the king of Tyre had a lot to do with Israel because they assisted in giving them quite a number of things to build the temple, particularly David and Solomon. And they walked among the stones of fire. If you remember the priest, he had the breastplate and he had the 12 stones, the stones of fire, which lit up when they communicated with God, and upon the holy mountain of God, or Zion. Kev wasn't finished, and we weren't finished with Kev. We said, look, we need to go deeper. We need to get the examination a little bit more thorough. We've just skirted on the edges. How about we look at the New Testament, Kev? Let's have a look at what the Apostle Paul said in Romans chapter 7, verse 17 to 20. Do you know what he said? Have you got that one tucked away? You know, the good that I would, it's that one there. The good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. Now, if I do that I would not, it's no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. Apostle Paul, what a perfect opportunity to reveal the truth of the matter if it was the devil at work causing him to do the good that he would not. He didn't say that. He said it's the sin that dwells in me. Bypassed the devil completely. Didn't even come into his mind. But when we understand that the devil is just a synonym for sin, the adversary, the false accuser, then we can really understand what Paul was getting at. If we go back and have a look at the origins of sin, we can learn a lot from these four passages. James 1, Mark 7, Jeremiah 17, and Matthew 15. Kev, you ready? We're going to have a look at these now. Okay. Don't take too long, Kev said. All right, sin's cause, James 1, 13 to 15. It's all about desire and craving. Desire brings sin. Sin, when it's fully established and grown, brings death. Nothing to do with the devil. Mark 7. Jesus' words, sin comes from within. That which cometh out of the man, that defileth the man, for from within, out of the heart of men, evil thoughts, adulteries, fornication, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, etc. All these defile nothing about the devil. Would have been a perfect opportunity for Jesus to reveal the truth if that was the truth, but it wasn't. It's the things that happen within us, in our nature, our human nature, that causes us to sin. Because therefore, what's there left for the devil to do? We do a pretty good job of it ourselves. Kevin comes back and says, well, was the serpent the devil? And we say, no, absolutely not. The serpent was subtle in the garden. It said to Eve, you won't die. But God doth know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes are opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. That was the serpent's lie in the garden. And it had a far-reaching punishment and effect right through to our day, thousands of years later. Genesis chapter 3:15 is a very important verse. This was God's punishment talking to the servant. This is not from the King James. It's from another translation, but carries the same effect. There'll be war between you and the woman, says God, between your seed and her seed. By him will your head be crushed, and by you his foot will be wounded. Tuck that one away, we'll return. We put it to you, we put it to Kev, that the real devil, the devil inside, is our human nature. And let's prove it. The devil is the power of death. And we've talked about that in Hebrews chapter 2:14. You know that chapter, don't you? And that verse. Forasmuch then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise took part of the same, that he might destroy him that had the power of death, that is the devil. Let's prove that. Paul says in Romans chapter 6, verse 23, that the wages of sin is death. And the devil has the power of death. Hebrews chapter 2:14, as we've said, Jesus destroyed the devil in his death. What did he destroy? Hebrews 9:26 and Romans 8 verse 3 ring the same tune. Jesus destroyed sin in the flesh in his death. And therefore, the devil is sin in the flesh. That's it, Kev. That's what's within. Sin in the flesh. Well, Kevin said, that's a real eye-opener. Kevin was so impressed he fell off his chair. He said, I didn't know that. That's an interesting thing that the New Testament has now shown me. They said, wait, Kev, there's more. Because Jesus was not ruled by the devil. Because the Apostle Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 22, that Jesus did know sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. Remember I said, just tuck away Genesis chapter 3:15 about the bruising. Well, Jesus was the seed of the woman, and his heel was bruised in that he was put to death on the cross, therefore destroying the devil, because 3 days later God raised him from the dead. And so when you think about Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, about the serpent being struck on the head and the serpent bruising the woman's heel. Christ was the woman's heel. It's not a permanent thing. You recover from that. You get a head strike and you're probably out for the count. And so Jesus, being in the grave for 3 days and being sinless, God rose him from the dead. But in the process, because Christ did no sin, Christ gave a fatal blow to the human nature that he possessed, in that when he was risen from the dead, God granted him immortality, never to sin again. And so he was rid of his human nature. Genesis 3:15, a very underrated but powerful verse, because really the devil is sin in the flesh. Kev. By this time, Kev was back on his chair. And says, well, you've really shown me some interesting things here. I had taken it for granted on what most of the churches teach me, what my pastor says, what the reverend says. The movies are full of it. It's not right, is it? I says, no. So I said to Kev, is the devil now ruling your life? I need to go away and think about that. So we left him with one more verse. Colossians chapter 3, verse 15. Let the peace of God rule in your hearts. Hope Kev was listening.